I was recently looking through some archival records from 1911, specifically the notes of a USDA official named F.H. King. He traveled through the Chinese countryside, and his descriptions are almost visceral. He describes watching farmers who didn't just till the land. They groomed it with a precision that bordered on the obsessive. He noted how every single scrap of organic matter, down to the very waste from their own bodies, was meticulously collected, fermented, and returned to the soil. To an American used to the vast, easy frontiers of the Midwest, it looked like a desperate, ritualistic survival tactic. But as I dug into the data behind his observations, I realized King wasn't just looking at a farm. He was looking at a biological machine running at 99% capacity. The geography of China is essentially a pressure cooker. While the United States is a relatively flat wind tunnel of fertile plains, China is a fortress of verticality, twice as mountainous as the U.S., but tasked with feeding triple population. For centuries, the Chinese civilization was forced to become what some call a Malthusian efficiency machine. They reach a level of agricultural perfection that is almost hard to wrap your head around. But then I came across a haunting contradiction. You would think that this incredible discipline, this total optimization of resources, would be the perfect springboard for an industrial revolution. Yet the exact opposite happened. This peak efficiency actually became a prison. Historians call it the high-level equilibrium trap. They were so good at surviving on the edge, so efficient at manual involution, that the very idea of a labor-saving machine became redundant, even nonsensical. It leaves you with a chilling question. Can a society become so perfect at one way of living that it accidentally audits itself out of a future? To understand how China became a superpower today, we first have to understand why its incredible success once kept it frozen in time.
It really is the central tension of China's entire history.
Yeah.
But here's the fascinating pivot. That same Malthusian pressure, that desperate need to optimize every single resource, it didn't just disappear.
Okay,
Yeah.
It's a paradox, isn't it? The idea that being too efficient, being too good at something, could actually hold a civilization back.
It is.
Everything we're taught is that efficiency is the goal. It leads to progress, to development.
But it can create a very specific kind of blindness. If your system, using human hands, can extract every last possible calorie from a plot of land, and you have hundreds of millions of hands available,
The labor is almost free.
the cost of labor is effectively zero. So when someone comes to you with a proposal for a clumsy, expensive, capital-intensive steam engine, why would you ever invest in that?
It makes no economic sense. You'd find a way to make the person work a little harder.
You optimize the human, not the machine. And that's the trap. You become so perfect at one way of doing things that you can't even conceive of another.
Trapped by your own competence.
Precisely. But as we said, that pressure, that Malthusian ghost, it didn't just vanish when the 20th century rolled around.
Right. And that's what we're going to unpack today in this deep dive. We're going to look at how that ancient biological machine, that farm running at 99% capacity, has morphed into a modern industrial machine.
And we're not just talking about factories here. We're talking about a cultural and institutional blueprint, a way of thinking that spans thousands of years.
It's a journey, really, from the mud of the Yellow River all the way to the clean rooms of semiconductor labs. And to be honest, to understand the high-tech side of things, I realized we have to start with something much, much older. I was reading about this one elderly railway engineer. He was in the mountains of Guizhou.
Guizhou is incredibly rugged terrain, some of the toughest in the world to build on.
Yeah, it's basically vertical. And this engineer, he had spent 40 years of his life tunneling through the exact same karst landscape that his ancestors had painstakingly carved into terraced rice paddies.
Wow.
And reading his story, it clicked for me. He isn't just a civil engineer building infrastructure. He sees himself as continuing this multi-thousand-year-old mandate to control the environment, to tame it.
To make it survivable.
Exactly. I tried to picture him, standing at the mouth of a new high-speed rail tunnel, touching that cold, reinforced concrete. It's probably the same calloused hands that generations ago guided water through irrigation dikes.
It's the same struggle.
For him, this mega project wasn't just a job or infrastructure. It was a collective survival pact. A pact against a geography that had tried to starve his lineage for centuries.
That phrase right there, collective survival pact, that is the key. That unlocks this entire way of thinking.
It felt so heavy reading it. It made me realize that the sheer efficiency of China's modern grid or its rail network, it's not just driven by economics or national pride. It's fueled by this deep historical desperation to master a landscape that offers absolutely no margin for error.
None.
It's a logic of survival, but scaled up to a continental national machine.
And to understand why that engineer feels that way, why that logic exists, you have to look at the water. You have to start with the water. Historically, China is what the historian Carl Wittfogel famously called a hydraulic empire.
A hydraulic empire.
Yeah.
Okay, that sounds like something out of a science fiction novel. What does that actually mean on the ground?
It means the state's very legitimacy, its fundamental right to rule, was entirely dependent on its ability to manage water, specifically the Yellow River.
A mother river.
It's called the Mother River, sure, but historically it was far better known as China's sorrow.
Sorrow.
Because it's a killer. I mean, a relentless, unpredictable killer. The historical records show it has changed its entire course 26 times.
Wait, not just flooded, it has moved where it flows into the sea.
A waterway hundreds of miles long just picks up and moves, wiping out everything in its path. And on top of that, it has flooded in a major way over 1,500 times.
1,500 times. That's,
Yeah.
I mean, that's not a natural disaster at that point. That's just a permanent feature of life.
It's a constant state of emergency. You know, in the West, we think of a river like the Mississippi or the Rhine as a trade route. It's an asset, it brings wealth.
Right.
In the North China Plain, the river is a suspended threat. Why? The river carries this incredible amount of fine yellow silt down from the lowest plateau. The silt deposits on the riverbed, so the riverbed itself slowly rises.
Okay, I think I follow.
So for centuries, what do? They built dikes on either side to keep it contained, but the riverbed kept rising. So they built the dikes higher and higher and higher,
Oh.
to the point where today, in many places, the riverbed of the Yellow River is actually higher than the surrounding farmland.
You're telling me the river's flowing above the level of the farms?
Yes. It's what's known as a hanging river. Imagine living in your house and looking up and seeing a massive volume of water flowing past, above your roofline, held back only by a wall of packed earth.
Fine. That's a nightmare.
It's an existential threat. If that dike breaks, it's not a flood that gives you a wet basement. It's an inland tsunami. It's millions dead and famine for years to follow.
So controlling that water wasn't a choice. It wasn't a policy option.
It was the only way to survive. And here's the political consequence. You cannot maintain a 1,500-kilometer-long system of dikes with a bunch of local town councils.
Right, because if the town upstream from you gets lazy and their section of the wall breaks, your town drowns. Everyone has to be in it together.
Everyone has to be coordinated. It necessitates a unified, powerful, central command. You need a massive bureaucracy that can mobilize millions of laborers at a moment's notice to dredge channels and reinforce walls. This constant war against the water, it created the blueprint for the centralized Chinese state.
The muscle memory.
The exact same institutional logic. So when you see them building the world's largest high-speed rail network in a decade, or the Three Gorges Dam, it's the same logic. The Great Wall of Water just became the high-speed rail network.
Instead of moving water to prevent famine, they're moving electricity and data and people to prevent economic stagnation. I want to dig into that modernization, though. You mentioned this concept of the industrial commons. It sounds like a park, but I have a feeling it's a bit more complex.
Think of the industrial commons as a shared toolbox for the entire nation. In a, let's say, a typical Western market economy, a company is an island. You have your proprietary technology, your specific suppliers, your trade secrets.
Right, you protect your intellectual property.
Of course. But in China, the state policy is to treat industrial capability like a public utility or electricity.
So it's like a national library, but instead of books, it's full of manufacturing processes and skilled workers.
It encompasses all these interdependent capabilities, the skills of the workforce, the shared R&D infrastructure, the incredibly dense supply chains. The state invests heavily in these things, not because any single one is immediately profitable, but because they strengthen the entire ecosystem for everyone.
I was reading about the Dujiangyan irrigation system, which, by the way, was built in 256 BC and is still working.
Still working perfectly.
That just blew my mind. But the research I saw draws a direct line from the logic of that ancient system to the smart factories they're building today.
The Dujiangyan system is genius. It works by automatically dividing the river into an inner and an outer channel to manage both flow and silt during flood and dry seasons. It's a self-regulating feedback loop, but it's built out of stone and bamboo.
An analog computer.
A hydraulic computer. Yeah. Now, today, look at the lights-out factories.
Lights out, meaning no people inside so you can turn the lights off?
Exactly. I've seen reports on these factories run by companies like Gree Electric or Huawei, where they're networked with next generation 5.5G, they are applying that same obsessive grooming that F.H. King saw in the rice paddies, but now they're grooming packets of data. They're monitoring the real-time temperature of a single drill bit from 1,000 miles away. They track the flow of materials with the same life-or-death desperation that ancient farmers tracked the flow of water.
It's so intense. The material also mentions interlocking innovation flywheels. Now, flywheel is a classic business buzzword. You hear it in every tech pitch deck. But here it seems to mean something more physical, more real.
It's much more substantial than a buzzword here. It's a literal description of how a massive breakthrough in one sector physically forces a breakthrough in an adjacent one.
Could you give me an example?
High-speed rail is the perfect one. So China decides, as a national priority, to build the world's largest HSR network, an insane undertaking. To do that, they need better steel for the rails, stronger, more consistent, so the entire metallurgy sector has to level up its game. Then, you can't run trains at 350 kilometers an hour without an incredibly stable and smart power grid. So the state grid has to get smarter. It has to be completely overhauled.
So the train pushes the steel and the steel and train push the grid.
Then, to monitor the tracks for tiny fissures or misalignments at that speed, you need incredibly precise, cheap sensors. So a whole new sensor industry is born out of that necessity.
And then, what happens to those sensors?
And this is the flywheel effect. Those advanced, cheap, abundant sensors are now part of the industrial commons. So who starts using them? The electric vehicle industry. The EV industry didn't just pop up out of nowhere. It's standing on the shoulders of the HSR infrastructure investment from a decade earlier.
So when we look at a modern BYD or a Xiaomi car, we're technically looking at the industrial grandchild of a high-speed train.
In terms of the supply chain DNA, yes, absolutely. One sector's solution becomes the next sector's foundation. It's a self-reinforcing cycle, just like the integrated water transport networks of the imperial era that connected the Yangtze, the Yellow, and the Pearl rivers into a single economic organism.
It's all connected.
Yeah.
I want to shift gears from the machines to the people, because all of this efficiency, all this grooming you're talking about, it requires immense human effort. I saw this video online recently. It was documenting a young technician in a high-precision sensor factory down in the Pearl River Delta. And watching her work was, it was hypnotic. Her level of diligence, it seemed to go beyond simple labor. It was like biological clockwork.
In what way?
Just the way she handled these tiny components, the focus. She was treating the micromillimeter precision of a patent conversion like it was a precious grain of rice being salvaged from a flooded field.
Every mitt counts.
And the narrative around her and her peers, it isn't the typical Western story of work hard to get rich. It's framed as, this is the only path to dignity. This is our contribution. It's this concept of involution that we talked about, but turned into a global competitive edge.
That word involution, or neiwan in Chinese, is everywhere right now. It's on the minds of every young person there.
And it's usually used negatively, right? Like a feeling of being on a treadmill.
Yes. It comes from anthropology, describing what we discussed with the rice farming. You pour more and more labor into a fixed plot of land for smaller and smaller gains. You're working harder and harder just to stay in the same place. It's growth without development.
Which sounds absolutely miserable. But watching this woman in the factory, I felt this really complex mix of admiration for her skill and a strange, lingering sadness. From my perspective, as an observer, I see the brilliance of this human-powered manufacturing miracle. But I also can't help but see the immense psychological weight of a culture that has learned to treat human labor as the ultimate and sometimes only renewable resource.
It is a fierce, disciplined beauty, but it's born from the absolute harshest of constraints.
Right.
But here is the pivot. Here's the twist that the data shows. China has somehow managed to weaponize this involution.
How do you weaponize burnout possible?
You do it by creating what you could call tournament-style competition. You take that cultural willingness to grind, that Malthusian muscle memory, and you channel it. You aim it at high-tech manufacturing.
Is this where the Little Giants program comes in?
Yeah.
It sounds kind of cute, like a Little League baseball team or something.
It is anything but cute. It is a brutal, state-run gladiator pit for companies.
A gladiator pit, okay.
The Ministry of Industry and Information Technology, the MIIT, identifies thousands of small and medium-sized enterprises. These aren't the big names like Alibaba or Tencent. These are obscure companies making, say, a very specific type of high-pressure valve for a hydrogen fuel tank.
So hyper-specialized niche players.
Extremely niche. And the MIIT says, We want to anoint a few of you as little giants. If you get selected, it's a golden ticket. You get massive subsidies, tax breaks, sometimes you even get land for free. You get access to the best talent.
And the catch.
The catch is that to get it, you have to outcompete, out-innovate, and outwork hundreds of other companies that make that exact same valve. The selection process is ferocious. It forces this intense involutionary competition at the company level.
So it creates a frenzy?
A complete frenzy. And this leads to what a traditional Western economist would look at and call waste or inefficiency.
So
look at the Chinese EV market a few years ago. There were literally hundreds of electric vehicle brands.
I remember seeing those pictures of the EV graveyards, just fields and fields of abandoned brand new cars from companies that went bust.
To a classical economist, that looks like a market failure. It's inefficient input and disorderly competition. Why on earth would you have 400 companies all trying to do the same thing? It's redundant. It's wasteful.
It's like the farmers obsessively grooming the soil again. It seems like overkill.
But look at who survived. Look at the companies that crawled out of that gladiator pit. BYD, Li Auto, NIO. They are unbelievably lean. They are battle-hardened. They have optimized their supply chains down to a fraction of a penny because they had to. They had no choice if they wanted to survive the domestic competition.
So the waste, it's the tuition fee. It's the price of admission for the excellence of the survivors.
Yes. The waste is a feature, not a bug. It's a brutal but effective way to force an acceleration of industrial evolution.
And this is the big contradiction, right? They can't keep doing this forever. They are running out of people. The demographics are shifting dramatically.
That's the ticking clock, and that is where intelligentization comes in. This is the escape hatch from the Malthusian trap. This is how they plan to leap over it.
I have to say, I was shocked when I saw the robot stats. I think my mental map of China is still, the place with endless cheap labor.
That map is 20 years out of date. In 2023, just last year, China accounted for 51% of all new industrial robot installations on the entire planet.
Wait, say that again, 51%.
Yes. They installed more industrial robots in 1 year than the rest of the world combined.
Staggering.
They are automating faster than any society in human history. They are desperately trying to replace that young woman in the sensor factory with a robotic arm that can work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and doesn't feel the psychological toll of involution.
It's so interesting, though. In the US or Europe, when we talk about automation, the conversation is almost always negative. It's the robots are coming for our jobs. It's framed as a threat.
In China, it's framed as a national necessity. They are facing a rapidly shrinking workforce. They need the robots just to maintain that high-level equilibrium they've achieved. They have to move from involution, which is just adding more labor, to high-quality growth, which is adding more technology.
I want to circle back to the ecosystem idea, the industrial commons, because it's not just about the big factories and the robots. The notes I read kept emphasizing that China is the only place in the world with all the suppliers for certain industries.
You can think of it as a rainforest of manufacturing.
A rainforest. So,
in a rainforest, you have the massive canopy trees. Those are your national champions, your Huaweis and BYDs. They're the ones you see from a distance. But the health of that forest, its resilience, depends entirely on the moss, the ferns, the insects, the bacteria in the soil.
the little guys.
The thousands and thousands of tiny, specialized subcontractors. The company that only makes the glue for the phone screen. The one that only makes the tiny motor that makes your phone vibrate.
There was that famous quote from Tim Cook, the CEO of Apple. He said something about tool and die makers.
Right. He said that in the United States, if you called a meeting of all of the expert tool and die engineers, you could probably fit them in a modest conference room.
Yep.
He said in China, you would need to fill multiple cities to hold them all.
That's an incredible visual. Just cities full of people who are masters at making precision molds.
And this density, this clustering, creates what economists call agglomeration externalities.
Hold on. Agglomeration externalities. That sounds like something I'd fail a final exam on. Does that just mean it's good to be close to your buddies?
Yes, but with a massive supercharger. It means that because everyone is physically located in the same area, innovation happens at light speed. If you're a product designer in Shenzhen and you come up with an idea for a new kind of hinge for a foldable phone,
You don't email a CAD file to a factory overseas and wait 2 weeks.
you walk across the street. The factory that can make the prototype is right there. The guy who makes the specialized screw for that hinge is in the next building over. The woman who applies the specific coating for that screw is probably downstairs.
So you can go from idea to physical prototype in an afternoon. something that would take a Silicon Valley firm weeks of shipping things back and forth across the Pacific.
Exactly. The friction of distance and time is almost completely eliminated.
And the great irony here is that Western companies were instrumental in building this very ecosystem, weren't they?
Oh, they played a massive role. Volkswagen. They originally came for the labor arbitrage, the cheap hands. But to get the quality they demanded for their products, they had to train the local suppliers. They transferred the know-how, the processes, the quality control standards.
The Tesla Gigapress story is the perfect example of this. I dug into this, and it's just wild. So Tesla's big idea was to cast the entire rear frame of the Model Y in one single piece, right? To replace something like 70 different welded parts.
A huge engineering challenge. You need a machine the size of a small house that can inject molten aluminum at immense pressure and speed.
And nobody makes a machine like that. So they partner with a Chinese firm, LK Group. Now, LK Group was already making casting machines, but nothing on this scale. Tesla basically co-engineers it with them, pushing them to the absolute limit.
And they succeed. LK Group builds the Gigapress for Tesla's Shanghai factory. Tesla gets a massive efficiency win. Everybody's happy. But here's the spillover effect.
LK Group now knows how to build gigapresses.
And they own the intellectual property, so who are they selling them to now?
All of Tesla's Chinese competitors.
Exactly. Xiaomi for its new car. Aito, which is Huawei's car brand. Series, all of them. Tesla effectively funded the R&D for the entire Chinese auto industry's ability to do gigacasting.
That is the industrial commons in action. The capability doesn't just belong to the brand, it now belongs to the ecosystem.
And the sources have a name for this process. It's an acronym, IDR. Digest.
It sounds like a biological process like eating.
It is, in an industrial sense. First, you introduce the foreign technology. Then you digest it, you take it apart, figure out how it works. Then you assimilate it into your local supply chain. And finally, the crucial step, you re-innovate. You make it better, faster, or cheaper than the original.
And it's not just cars or electronics. I was stunned to see they're doing this with biology itself.
Synthetic biology. And this is fascinating because it loops right back to our opening. It loops back to the farmers.
The farmers fermenting waste to make fertilizer.
China has this massive, historically deep capacity for fermentation. Think about soy sauce, vinegar, baijiu. It's a core part of the culture and the economy. Now, they are pivoting that same industrial fermentation infrastructure to produce things like amino acids, vitamins, and advanced biomaterials.
The data I saw said they're undercutting Western chemical companies by as much as 50% on the cost of these biological products.
Because they are treating high-tech biology with the same scale and efficiency mindset that they apply to making steel or solar panels, they're turning the building blocks of life into a mass-produced commodity.
You know, listening to all this, it seems like this efficiency mindset isn't just about making money or hitting economic targets. It feels deeper than that. It feels like it's about safety, about security.
Which brings us directly to the geopolitical side of this, because this entire domestic industrial machine is being built with a purpose on the world map.
This brings me to another perspective I encountered while preparing for this. I try to imagine a logistics planner, a guy in a coastal trade hub like Shanghai or Ningbo, and he's staring at a vast digital map of the Eurasian continent, the new Silk Road. And he's calculating the efficiency of every shipping container moving west towards Central Asia as if they were calories.
Calorie counting for the state.
Exactly. His story is one of profound inherited resource sensitivity. He got this from a civilization that literally learned to recycle everything down to human waste just to survive. So for him, a term like global supply chain resilience isn't some corporate buzzword you put in a PowerPoint.
No, it's existential.
It's the modern version of a communal granary during a drought.
The communal granary, that is such a potent and ancient image.
And he talks about results-oriented integration with the same kind of hard-nosed pragmatism that an ancient village elder would use to distribute shared water rights from an irrigation canal. There's no ideology, just what works. And I found his perspective so fascinating because it reveals a strategic planning ethos that is fundamentally collective, not individualistic.
The survival of the group over the individual.
Right. And when I reflect on his cold, calculated pursuit of stability, I understand that this isn't just about economic dominance. It's that deep-seated fear of scarcity driving a national reach for continental unity. And while the sheer intensity of this state-led strategic drive can feel overwhelming to an outsider like me, I try to see it as a cultural reflex, The eternal search for a buffer against that Malthusian ghost that has haunted the mountains and plains of his home for 3,000 years.
That fear of scarcity is the engine of their grand strategy. The report from the Center for Strategic and Budgetary Assessments calls China a composite land-sea power. Most great powers throughout history have been primarily one or the other, the British Empire and later the United States. Classic sea powers. Their power comes from controlling the oceans. A classic land power. Its power comes from its immense strategic depth, its landmass. China is stuck in the middle. It's both.
Which leads to the two-front dilemma, right?
Exactly. They have this massive coastline, so they have to be a sea power to trade with the world and protect their shipping. But they also have these huge, difficult land borders with other powerful nations, India, Russia, Vietnam. So they have to be a strong land power to defend their territory.
That sounds strategically exhausting. You have to be looking in both directions at all times.
It's a strategic nightmare. And then you layer on top of that the tyranny of distance. To be a true global power, you have to be able to project power far beyond your borders. But China is geographically hemmed in by what strategists call the first island chain.
Japan, Taiwan, the Philippines.
All running down their coast. Which means in a conflict, their access to the open ocean could be easily blocked. This leads to the ultimate fear, the Malacca dilemma.
The Strait of Malacca. The choke point.
The choke point. The vast majority of China's imported energy and a huge chunk of its trade passes through that one tiny strait between Malaysia and Indonesia. If that strait were ever to be closed to them,
the entire economy would starve. The machine would stop.
The machine would grind to a halt within months. So when you look at the Belt and Road Initiative, the BRI, it's not a vanity project. It's not just about influence.
It's a survival strategy. It's an escape route.
It is a desperate search for strategic corridors, for land routes, railways, pipelines that run west across Central Asia so that they can never be strangled at sea. It's the communal granary again, but on a global scale.
It's interesting how they frame it publicly, though. They use this phrase a lot, a community of common destiny.
Which to many Western ears sounds like empty propaganda.
It does. It sounds very utopian.
But if you look at it through the cultural lens of a hydraulic society, it makes a different kind of sense. It reflects that deep-seated idea of reciprocity that we saw in the village irrigation systems.
We're all in the same boat.
Clearly, in a hydraulic society, if your upstream neighbor's dike breaks, your field floods too. Your fates are physically and inescapably linked. So the grand strategy is to integrate China's economy so deeply with its neighbors that conflict becomes unthinkable.
Because it would be too costly for everyone involved. Mutually assured economic destruction.
It's a strategy to reduce what they call balancing pressure. If everyone's prosperity depends on the smooth functioning of the Chinese supply chain, nobody can afford to team up against you. It's a win-win, but in a very specific strategic sense. I win because you can't afford to let me lose.
It's both defensive and offensive at the exact same time, like a seawall.
Exactly like a seawall.
So, okay, let's bring all these threads together. We have this incredible rainforest-like industrial commons. We have this weaponized involution driving competition. And we have this grand geostrategy of connectivity and resilience. Where is this whole machine going next?
They are now explicitly pivoting to the final phase of the plan. And that phase is called technological self-reliance.
Moving beyond just being the factory of the world.
They want to stop assembling other people's designs and start inventing the future themselves. They want to be the world's laboratory.
The sources I read mentioned the new style whole of nation system. Intense.
It is the ultimate mobilization of national resources. The best analogy is something like the American Manhattan Project to build the atomic bomb, or the Apollo program to get to the moon.
Okay, so massive state-directed science project.
But imagine applying that level of focus and funding to everything at once. To semiconductors, to artificial intelligence, to biotechnology, to quantum computing. They are mobilizing every resource, state-owned enterprises, private companies, universities, individual researchers, and aiming them all at breaking through what they call choke point technologies.
And choke points are the areas where they're still reliant on foreign tech, things like advanced chips that could be cut off by sanctions.
Yes. They are applying the ancient logic of controlling the flow of the Yellow River to controlling the modern flow of silicon and electrons. And they are targeting what they call future industries.
And humanoid robots seem to be the poster child for this whole effort.
The Ministry of Industry officially called humanoid robots the next disruptive product after computers and smartphones. It's a national priority.
When you think about it, it makes a terrifying amount of sense.
Yeah.
If you already dominate the global supply chains for advanced batteries, electric motors, and AI sensors, what do you get when you put them all together in one package?
You get a humanoid robot, and it perfectly solves their demographic crisis. If you're running out of young people, you build new ones.
It's such a full circle moment, isn't it? The civilization that spent 4,000 years perfecting the biological machine of farming, learning how to turn waste into soil and human labor into calories, is now betting everything on creating a new kind of biological machine through synthetic biology and humanoid robotics.
They are using that same ancient Malthusian discipline, that unique ability to organize incredible complexity at a massive scale to literally engineer the future.
So we've traveled all the way from the rice paddies of 1911 to the robot factories of 2025. What's the final takeaway from this deep dive?
I think when you look at China's rise through this historical and geographical lens, you realize it's not just about economics or politics. It's about a civilization that has spent 4,000 years perfecting the art of survival under extreme, relentless pressure. They have built a society that functions like a finely tuned, high-pressure engine. But it's crucial to remember the warning from the very beginning, the high-level equilibrium trap.
That being too perfect can be a prison.
The danger of such a perfect, totally optimized system is that it can become incredibly rigid. The very efficiency that makes them a superpower also makes the cost of any error, any miscalculation, catastrophically high. They've built a machine that is so integrated, so complex, that it cannot afford to stop.
That is a very powerful image to leave on. The line between a perfectly optimized machine and an incredibly fragile one is much, much thinner than we think. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the engine of the East. It's been a fascinating journey through time and technology.